At 10:47 on a cold November night, Meredith Lawson Hartwell placed 9 years of marriage on her husband's desk. Vincent Hartwell looked down at the cream-colored divorce papers, then slowly raised his eyes to his pregnant wife. Meredith was 32 weeks pregnant. One hand rested beneath the curve of her belly. The other remained flat against the walnut desk because she no longer trusted her knees. Vincent had returned from Manhattan 20 minutes earlier, wearing a charcoal Brioni coat, a white shirt open at the collar, and the Rolex Meredith had given him on their 5th anniversary. His iPhone had not stopped vibrating. He kept turning it face down. Meredith noticed. She noticed everything now. "What is this?" Vincent asked. "You know what it is." His expression hardened. Outside the tall windows of the Hartwell estate, rain moved across the dark Westchester lawns. A black Mercedes S-Class waited beneath the stone portico. Somewhere downstairs, a housekeeper quietly closed the kitchen. The entire house seemed to understand that something was ending. Vincent opened the first page. "You filed for divorce?" Meredith swallowed. "You wanted freedom. Take it." For the first time that evening, Vincent looked genuinely surprised. Only 3 days earlier, Meredith had sat alone inside a maternal fetal medicine office on 5th Avenue while Dr. Lauren Whitaker showed her their son's face on an ultrasound screen. The chair beside Meredith had been empty. Vincent had promised he would come. He had called 30 minutes before the appointment and blamed an investor dinner. That night, Sienna Caldwell posted a photograph from a private Manhattan restaurant. There was no picture of Vincent. There did not need to be. At the edge of the photograph was a man's wrist. Meredith recognized the Rolex immediately. She had spent months choosing it. Vincent pushed back from the desk. "Meredith, if this is about Sienna." "It isn't." His eyes narrowed. She continued. "It's about me finally believing what you have been showing me." "That is not fair." Meredith almost laughed. "Fair?" She thought about 2 miscarriages. The nights Vincent once held her while she cried. The fertility appointments, the nursery upstairs. They had been afraid to finish because neither of them wanted to believe this pregnancy was safe. And somewhere between those losses and this child, the man who once held her hand had started treating her devotion like furniture. Always there, never questioned. "I'm not asking you to choose me anymore," Meredith said. Vincent stared at her. For one terrible second, she hoped he would refuse. She hated herself for hoping. Then Vincent opened the desk drawer. He removed a black Mont Blanc pen. Meredith stopped breathing. She had given him that pen 11 years earlier when Hartwell Atlantic signed its first major financing agreement. Back then, Vincent had kissed her in a freezing Brooklyn office and promised that if they ever became rich, nothing important between them would change. Now he uncapped the same pen. "Are you sure?" he asked. Meredith placed a hand over their son. "Yes," Vincent signed. One stroke, then another. 9 years ended in less than 5 seconds. Meredith took the papers, walked upstairs, entered the unfinished nursery, and quietly closed the door. Only then did she begin to cry. Downstairs, Vincent stared at his signature for several seconds. Then his iPhone vibrated again. "Sienna Caldwell," he answered immediately. "It's done." Silence. Then Sienna asked something Vincent did not expect. "Did Meredith sign too?" "Yes." Another pause. "Where is she right now?" Vincent frowned. "Upstairs." "Why?" Sienna's voice softened. "No, I'm happy for you." But Vince had spent his entire adult life recognizing fear, greed, and lies. And suddenly, he heard all 3 in her voice. For the first time that night, Vincent Hartwell wondered whether his pregnant wife had just escaped something far more dangerous than a broken marriage. At 6:38 the next morning, Vincent Hartwell expected the house to be empty. It wasn't. Meredith was sitting at the kitchen island in a gray maternity sweater, eating half a piece of toast while reading something on her iPad. A blood pressure monitor rested beside her coffee mug. Her wedding ring did not. Vincent stopped near the doorway. For some reason, that small detail affected him more than the divorce papers had. Meredith looked up. "Good morning." Her voice was calm. No swollen eyes, no accusations, no suitcase by the door. Vincent had spent most of the night waiting for an explosion that never came. He loosened his tie. "You're still here." Meredith looked almost amused. "I live here too. At least until my attorney finishes reviewing the temporary arrangement." Vincent pulled out a chair. "I thought you might go to your aunt's house. I will probably tomorrow." The answer irritated him, not because she was leaving, but because she had clearly been making decisions without asking him. For 9 years, Meredith had discussed everything with him: flights, doctors, family dinners, even the color of the nursery walls. Now she was organizing the end of their marriage as if he were simply another appointment on her calendar. Vincent glanced at her left hand again. "Where is your ring?" "In the jewelry box." "You took it off fast." Meredith lifted her eyes. "You signed fast." He had no answer. The silence between them lasted several seconds. Then Meredith folded her napkin and stood carefully. Her son shifted beneath her sweater. Vincent noticed the way she placed one hand under her belly. "You okay?" "I'm 32 weeks pregnant. My back hurts. My ankles are swollen. I sleep in 20-minute pieces." "That's not what I meant." "I know." She walked toward the counter, picked up a folder, and handed it to him. "Your attorney can send all divorce communication to Caroline Hayes." Vincent looked at the name. "You already hired someone?" "Yes. Since when?" "Since I stopped believing you were going to fix this." The sentence landed harder than he expected. Vincent glanced toward his iPhone. There were 3 missed calls from Sienna. Meredith saw the screen light up. She said nothing. That somehow made it worse. "Meredith," she looked at him. "This isn't how I wanted things to happen." A sad expression crossed her face. "You keep saying things like that as if they happened without you." Then she picked up her handbag. "I have work." Vincent frowned. "You should be resting." "I'm going to the foundation office for 2 hours." "You were in tears last night." Meredith's expression changed. Not anger, something colder. "You weren't supposed to hear that." Vincent realized she knew. The nursery was directly above his study. He must have paused beneath it long enough for her to understand he had been downstairs while she cried. "I almost came up." "But you didn't." He looked away. Meredith adjusted the strap of her bag. "You don't have to start pretending to be my husband now, Vincent. We already signed the part where you stop." She left before he could answer. At 8:12, Vincent's black Mercedes S-Class pulled into the underground garage beneath Hartwell Atlantic's Park Avenue headquarters. By 8:20, he knew something was wrong. Sienna had not come to work. Her assistant said she had canceled every meeting before sunrise. No explanation, no return date. Vincent called her. Voicemail. He called again. Nothing. At the same time, 20 minutes away, Meredith entered the smaller office of the Hartwell Family Relief Foundation. The foundation occupied the 12th floor of a modest midtown building, far from the polished marble and private elevators of Vincent's headquarters. Meredith preferred it that way. On one wall were photographs of families the foundation had helped. A truck driver receiving treatment after a spinal injury. A warehouse employee's daughter graduating from nursing school. A widow holding scholarship letters for her 2 sons after her husband died in an industrial accident. Those people were why Meredith stayed involved, not the Hartwell name. Her assistant, Megan Price, handed her a Starbucks decaf. "You look tired." "I am." Megan did not ask why. Everyone in the office had probably seen the rumors already. Meredith opened her MacBook Pro. She had promised herself she would work only 2 hours. Instead, one transaction caught her attention. Meridian Advisory, LLC. She frowned, then found another, then another, all categorized as consulting reimbursements. Meredith opened the approval history. Her name appeared on 2 of them. She leaned closer to the screen. "That's impossible." Megan turned. "What? I never approved these." Meredith called Howard Bennett, Hartwell Atlantic's 60-year-old chief financial officer. He answered immediately. "Howard, do you know Meridian Advisory?" A pause. "No. Should I?" "There are foundation payments to them." "How much?" Meredith gave him the numbers. Howard's tone changed. "Don't touch anything else." Her stomach tightened. "Why?" "I'm going to verify the vendor." 27 minutes later, Howard called back. His voice was lower now. "Meredith, Meridian Advisory was registered 14 months ago through a corporate services firm in Delaware. That doesn't tell us anything." It does now." Meredith gripped the edge of the desk. Howard continued. "I found the beneficial contact listed in the bank onboarding documents." Meredith already knew she was not going to like the answer. "Who?" "Sienna Caldwell." For several seconds, Meredith said nothing. Then she looked at the date of the first payment, 11 months earlier. Long before she had suspected the affair. Long before the missed appointments. Long before the photograph. Meredith slowly leaned back in her chair. Sienna had not entered their lives because she wanted Vincent. She had entered their lives because she wanted access, and Vincent had opened the door for her. By the time Meredith understood that the affair was only the surface of the betrayal, Sienna Caldwell was already gone, and she had taken something far more dangerous than a married man's loyalty with her. At 10:06 that morning, Meredith Lawson Hartwell walked into Hartwell Atlantic's Park Avenue headquarters, carrying a folder she wished did not exist. The marble lobby looked exactly as it always had. Security officers stood behind polished desks. A digital market ticker moved silently across one wall. Executives in dark suits passed beneath the enormous Hartwell Atlantic logo, without knowing that someone inside the company had been moving money through a charity meant to help injured workers and grieving families. Meredith felt sick, not from the pregnancy, but from the thought that Sienna Caldwell had used those people as camouflage. Howard Bennett was waiting for her on the 31st floor. The 60-year-old executive closed the conference room door behind her and pushed a printed report across the table. I pulled everything I could without alerting half the company. Meredith lowered herself carefully into a chair. How bad? Howard sat across from her. Right now, suspicious, not catastrophic. That doesn't sound comforting. It isn't supposed to. He pointed to 3 transactions. $42,000. $48,500. $39,750. They're small enough to avoid the higher approval threshold, Howard said. Different descriptions, different months, same vendor. Meridian Advisory. Yes. Meredith stared at Sienna's name on the ownership record. Why would she steal from the foundation? Howard shook his head. I'm not convinced she was stealing from it. Meredith looked up. What do you mean? I think she may have been using it. Before Howard could explain, the conference room door opened. Vincent entered without knocking. His black suit was immaculate, but his expression was not. He looked as though he had not slept. What the hell is going on? Howard remained calm. I was about to brief you. Vincent's eyes went to Meredith. You came here without calling me. Meredith almost smiled at the absurdity of it. We're getting divorced, Vincent. I'm not required to ask permission before entering an office I've worked with for 7 years. That's not what I meant. It usually isn't. Howard cleared his throat. Can we focus? Vincent sat. Howard explained the transactions, the vendor registration, and Sienna's connection. Vincent listened without interrupting. When Howard finished, Vincent took out his iPhone and called Sienna. Voicemail. He called again. Nothing. She's not answering me. Meredith looked at him. She wasn't at work. No. When did she leave? I don't know. That answer seemed to embarrass him. Meredith understood why. Vincent had risked his marriage for a woman whose movements he apparently knew less about than his security team did. Howard leaned back. Before anyone accuses anyone, we need records, bank onboarding documents, access logs, invoices, approvals. Vincent stood. I'm going to her apartment. Meredith's eyes narrowed. Why? To find out what she knows, or to hear whatever explanation makes you feel better. Vincent turned toward her. That's unfair. Meredith's face went still. You used that word yesterday, too. He said nothing. 20 minutes later, Vincent's Mercedes S-Class pulled up outside a luxury residential building near Fifth Avenue. The apartment had been leased through Hartwell Atlantic for Sienna 18 months earlier. Company counsel met him in the lobby and confirmed they had legal authority to inspect corporate property after Sienna failed to report to work. The doorman looked uncomfortable. Miss Caldwell left early this morning. With anyone? Sir luggage? 2 large suitcases. Vincent's stomach tightened. What time? About 5:40. The apartment was nearly empty. The Dior dresses were gone. The cosmetics were gone. The framed photographs were gone. Even the Cartier bracelet Vincent had given her 6 months earlier was missing from the glass tray beside the bed. Only one thing remained, a half-empty bottle of wine in the refrigerator. Vincent stood in the center of the living room, staring at the Manhattan skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Last night he had signed divorce papers because some part of him believed Sienna was waiting on the other side of them. But Sienna had packed before sunrise, maybe before he had even signed. His iPhone rang. Preston Hartwell. Vincent had answered. His cousin's voice sounded relaxed. I heard there's a problem with the foundation. Vincent frowned. Who told you? People talk, not about this. A pause. Then Preston spoke. Vincent, don't turn this into something bigger than it is. Sienna probably panicked. You know she's gone. Another pause. Too short for most people to notice. Long enough for Vincent, Preston continued. You've got enough problems. The divorce, the board, the banks. Handle this quietly. Vincent's voice cooled. The banks. Silence. I meant if they hear about it. Vincent looked around the empty apartment for the first time. Sienna's disappearance no longer felt personal. It felt planned. Back at the foundation office, Meredith closed her MacBook Pro and prepared to leave when Howard stopped beside her desk. There's something else. She looked up. Howard placed another report in front of her. Meredith read the date. Her throat tightened. The first Meridian payment had been approved 11 months earlier. That week, Meredith had been in the hospital after losing her second pregnancy. She remembered the room, the fluorescent lights. Vincent sleeping in a chair beside her bed, the grief so heavy she could barely speak. Yet, according to the foundation system, Meredith had electronically approved the payment at 9:14 that night. She looked at Howard. I was in surgery. I know. I didn't approve this. I know that too. Meredith stared at the timestamp. Someone had not merely stolen money. Someone had used her identity while she was losing her child. And suddenly, the betrayal became something much colder than an affair. Sienna Caldwell had not entered Meredith's marriage by accident, and the first proof of her plan had been planted on one of the worst nights of Meredith's life. At 7:18 that evening, Meredith Lawson Hartwell realized she had not felt her baby move in almost 3 hours. She was sitting alone in the small guest bedroom at Judith Lawson's house in Greenwich, Connecticut. A half-open Amazon box rested beside the dresser. Inside was a portable bassinet Judith had ordered for the baby. A folded navy blanket lay across the chair. Meredith's Kindle was open on the nightstand, but she had been staring at the same page for 20 minutes without reading a word. Her mind kept returning to the timestamp from 11 months earlier. The night she had been in surgery after losing her second pregnancy. Someone had used her electronic approval while she was lying under hospital lights, grieving a child she would never hold. Now another child was inside her, and he was suddenly very still. Meredith placed both hands over her belly. Come on, Noah. Nothing. She stood carefully and walked to the kitchen. Judith looked up from the stove. You okay? I don't know. The words came out too quickly. Meredith drank cold water, then lay on her left side the way Dr. Lauren Whitaker had taught her. They waited 5 minutes. 10. Meredith's breathing became shallow. Judith did not tell her not to worry. She simply picked up her car keys. We're going in. At 8:30, Meredith was connected to a fetal monitor at New York Presbyterian. A nurse adjusted the sensors across her stomach for several terrifying seconds. The room was silent. Meredith stared at the ceiling. Then the monitor found him. A fast, steady heartbeat filled the room. Meredith covered her mouth and started crying. Judith squeezed her hand. Dr. Lauren Whitaker entered 10 minutes later. The baby looks good, she said, but your blood pressure is too high. Meredith closed her eyes. How high? High enough that I need you to stop pretending stress is something you can simply work through. I'm trying. I know. Dr. Whitaker sat beside her. You've had 2 losses. You're 32 weeks pregnant. Your body does not care that your marriage is ending or that your foundation is under investigation. It only knows you're under pressure. Meredith looked at the empty chair on the other side of the bed. She remembered Vincent sitting there after their last miscarriage. He had refused to leave. He had slept upright for 2 nights, one hand wrapped around hers. That man had existed. That was what hurt most. Across Manhattan, Vincent Hartwell was sitting inside a private conference room at the Plaza Hotel when his attorney placed a bank letter in front of him. Hartwell Atlantic's $75 million revolving credit facility was being reviewed. Not canceled, not yet, but temporarily restricted until the foundation transactions were explained. Preston Hartwell leaned forward. This is exactly why we need to control the narrative. Vincent barely heard him. His iPhone had lit up with a call from Judith Lawson. He stepped away from the table. Judith? Her voice was controlled. Meredith is at the hospital. Vincent stopped breathing. What happened? She wasn't feeling the baby move. The room around him disappeared. Is he okay? Yes, for now. For now, her blood pressure is high. Vincent grabbed his coat. Preston stood. Where are you going? The hospital. We have bankers waiting. Vincent turned. My wife is in the hospital. Preston's expression hardened. You signed divorce papers yesterday. Vincent stared at him. She's still carrying my son. Then he walked out. 40 minutes later, Vincent reached the hospital. He moved through the private entrance without his usual security detail. The nurse at the desk checked the chart. Mrs. Hartwell was discharged 20 minutes ago. Vincent frowned. Where did she go? I can't give you that information. I'm her husband. The nurse looked at him. Then you may want to call her. The words hit harder than she intended. Vincent stepped away and called Meredith. She answered on the fourth ring. Hello. Are you okay? A pause. Yes. And Noah, he's okay. Vincent closed his eyes. Why didn't you call me? Meredith was quiet. Then she asked softly, Would you have answered? Vincent had no answer. She continued, I'm staying with Judith tonight. Dr. Whitaker wants me resting. I'll come. No, Meredith. No, Vincent. I need quiet. He leaned against the hospital wall. I was scared. So was I. Her voice broke slightly. But I'm learning not to expect you when I'm scared. The line went silent. Vincent lowered his head. Then another call appeared. Sienna Caldwell. For 1 second he considered ignoring it. Then he answered, Where are you? Sienna sounded breathless. I need your help. Start talking. I didn't steal from the foundation. Preston forced me into something. Vincent's eyes narrowed. What? I can explain, but not over the phone. Then explain where you are. I will, but first I need something. Vincent's voice became cold. What? Meredith's foundation credentials. He stopped moving. Why? I need them to prove she approved the transfers. Vincent stared through the hospital window at the Manhattan lights. My wife didn't approve anything. Sienna hesitated. Just 1 second. But it was enough. Then she whispered, You don't know that. Vincent's entire expression changed. No, he said quietly. I know exactly that. Sienna tried to speak again. Vincent ended the call. For the first time since the affair began, he did not feel desire, guilt, or confusion. He felt suspicion, and suddenly he understood something terrifying. Sienna had never needed freedom from Meredith. She had needed access to her. Vincent had destroyed his marriage for a woman who was not trying to take Meredith's place. She was trying to use it. Vincent did not call Sienna back that night. For the first time since their affair began, he let her name disappear from his iPhone screen without answering. He stood alone in the hospital corridor for another minute, staring through the windows at Manhattan, then called Howard Bennett. I need every access record connected to the foundation. Howard's voice sharpened. Every record? Corporate devices, vendor onboarding, building access, conference room logs, anything legal counsel can preserve. Howard was quiet for a moment. You think Sienna used Meredith's credentials? I think she knows more than she should. That is not the same thing. I know. Vincent rarely admitted uncertainty. Howard noticed. I'll call counsel. Vincent ended the call and drove back to Westchester. The house felt wrong without Meredith. Her slippers were still beside the bed. A bottle of prenatal vitamins stood on the bathroom counter. The unfinished nursery smelled faintly of new wood and baby detergent. Vincent walked inside and looked at the empty crib. On the dresser sat the small Tiffany box Margaret had bought for Noah. He opened it. Inside was a silver baby spoon engraved with the Hartwell name. Vincent closed the box quickly. His phone rang. Sienna. This time he answered. Where are you? I told you I'm trying to protect myself from Preston. Yes. Then why did you ask for Meredith's credentials? Silence. Sienna finally spoke. Because Preston wants to make it look like she approved the transfers. Vincent's jaw tightened. That doesn't answer my question. I need access to prove he altered the records. You don't need my wife's password to prove fraud. Sienna exhaled sharply. You don't understand how deep this goes. Then explain it. I can't over the phone. Vincent closed his eyes. The old Vincent would have gone to her. He would have wanted to see her face, hear her explanation, let attraction soften his suspicion. That realization disgusted him. Send the address. Sienna hesitated, then his phone buzzed. A Ritz-Carlton residence in Manhattan. Vincent did not go alone. By midnight, corporate counsel and a private forensic consultant were sitting in an adjacent room while Vincent entered the suite. Sienna looked nothing like the polished woman who had attended board dinners in Dior. She wore a cream sweater and black pants. No jewelry, no makeup. She looked frightened for several seconds. Vincent hated how quickly a part of him wanted to believe her. Sienna stepped closer. Thank God you came. Vincent did not touch her. Start talking. She handed him a small USB drive. Preston has been using shell companies for months. Meridian is one of them. Your name is attached to Meridian. He made me set it up. Why? He said it was temporary consulting work. Vincent stared at her. You expect me to believe you moved foundation money without asking questions? Her eyes filled with tears. I made mistakes. Did you use Meredith's login? No. The answer came too quickly. Vincent noticed. Sienna reached toward him. Vincent, please. I was scared. He stepped back. She froze. Do you love me? He asked. The question surprised both of them. Sienna blinked. What? You wanted me free? I'm free now. She swallowed. Yes, that wasn't my question. Her eyes shifted away. Vincent felt something inside him collapse. He had destroyed his marriage for a woman who could not answer 3 simple words. Across Connecticut, Meredith sat at Judith's kitchen table wearing one of her aunt's oversized sweaters. An Amazon box containing baby bottles sat unopened near the refrigerator. Judith placed a mug of decaf coffee beside her. You need sleep. I need my brain to stop. Judith sat across from her. Do you want him back? Meredith did not pretend she misunderstood. For several seconds, she stared into the mug. I want the man I married back. Judith said nothing. Meredith's eyes filled. The one who slept in a hospital chair after we lost the baby. The one who used to bring me dinner when I worked 12-hour shifts. The one who promised I would never feel alone in his house. Her voice broke. I don't think that man exists anymore. Judith reached across the table, then stopped waiting for him. Meredith finally cried, not loudly. Just the exhausted tears of a woman who had spent too long trying to save something by herself. Her phone rang. Howard Bennett. Meredith wiped her face and answered. Howard? I found another transaction. She immediately straightened. How much? $1.2 million. Her heart dropped. That came from the foundation? Not exactly. It passed through a related corporate account after Meridian had already been approved as a vendor. Meredith stood. Who approved it? Howard was silent. Then he said, You did. Meredith felt the room tilt. No, I know. I never authorized a transfer that size. I know that, too. She gripped the edge of the table. Howard continued. The digital approval uses your credentials, your security certificate, and your authorization chain, Meredith whispered. Then how do I prove it wasn't me? Howard's voice became very quiet. We start with the timestamp. Meredith held her breath. Why? Because I just checked the date. He paused. Meredith, you were in surgery that night. She closed her eyes. The memory returned instantly. The hospital gown, the empty feeling inside her. Vincent holding her hand after they lost their second child, Howard continued. And someone was approving money under your name while you were unconscious. Meredith had thought Sienna stole her husband. Now she understood the truth was worse. Someone had been quietly building a crime around her identity long before the affair ever began. At 8:20 the next morning, Meredith Lawson Hartwell was no longer just a betrayed wife. She was a liability. Caroline Hayes, the attorney Meredith had hired for the divorce, sat across from her at Judith's dining table with a legal pad, a silver laptop, and a stack of printed bank records. Howard Bennett had joined by secure video call. Meredith stared at the transaction carrying her electronic approval. $1.2 million, her name, her credentials, her authorization chain. Everything looked real, except Meredith had been unconscious in a hospital operating room when it happened. Caroline folded her hands. From this moment forward, do not delete anything. I wasn't planning to. No emails, no text messages, no files, no old devices, nothing. Meredith nodded. Caroline continued. Your personal attorney needs to remain separate from Vincent's legal team. He offered to send his lawyers. Of course he did. Meredith looked up. Caroline's voice stayed professional. That does not mean he is trying to hurt you. But Hartwell Atlantic's attorneys represent Hartwell Atlantic. Vincent's attorneys represent Vincent. Right now, your interests may overlap, but they are not identical. That sentence made everything feel suddenly real. This was not a marital argument anymore. Meredith could not simply trust that her husband would fix it. Howard adjusted his glasses on the screen. The forensic team wants your MacBook Pro, Foundation iPad, and work phone. Meredith looked toward her handbag. My personal messages are on that laptop. I know, Howard said gently. There are photographs from the pregnancies, emails from my mother before she died. Caroline leaned forward. We can document what is personal, but if the device was used for foundation work, preserving it protects you. Meredith slowly nodded. She opened the MacBook one last time. The wallpaper was an ultrasound image of Noah. She stared at it for several seconds before shutting the computer. Then she handed it to Caroline. Across Manhattan, Vincent Hartwell was discovering how quickly suspicion could become strategy. A closed meeting was underway on the 33rd floor of Hartwell Atlantic. Preston Hartwell stood beside a digital presentation showing the foundation transactions. Two independent directors sat at the long conference table. Howard's chair was empty. Vincent noticed that immediately. "Where is Howard?" Preston answered, with Meredith. Vincent's expression changed. Preston clicked to the next slide. "The situation is becoming harder to contain." "What situation?" "Your wife's credentials authorized a suspicious transfer." "My wife did not authorize anything." One director cleared his throat. "We understand you believe that. I don't believe it. We have hospital records." Preston leaned against the table. "Hospital records prove Meredith was in surgery. They do not prove she didn't authorize something earlier." Vincent stared at him. The room became very quiet. Preston continued carefully. She had access. She managed the foundation, and she filed for divorce immediately before this surfaced. Vincent's chair moved back. "Choose your next words carefully." Preston raised both hands. "I'm saying what the board will ask." "You're saying my pregnant wife stole from a charity?" "I'm saying we should investigate everyone." Vincent looked at him for a long time. Preston had always been cautious, measured, never reckless, but now he seemed almost eager for Meredith to become part of the scandal. That bothered Vincent more than the accusation itself. Later that afternoon, Margaret Hartwell arrived at Judith's home. She carried homemade chicken soup in a glass container and wore the same pearl earrings Meredith remembered from family Christmas dinners. Judith opened the door but did not invite her in immediately. "Meredith decides." Margaret nodded. A few minutes later, the two women sat across from each other in the small kitchen. Margaret looked around. The unopened bassinet, baby clothes folded on a chair, a blood pressure monitor beside the sink. Everything was painfully ordinary. "You could have stayed at the estate," Margaret said. Meredith's expression tightened. "I needed somewhere quiet." Margaret looked down. "I heard about the transactions." Meredith waited. Then Margaret asked the question that broke something between them. "Is there any chance you approved something and simply forgot?" Meredith stared at her. Margaret immediately looked uncomfortable. "I'm not accusing you. You just did. I'm trying to understand." Meredith's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. "I was in surgery after losing a baby when that transfer was approved." Margaret swallowed. "I know. No, I don't think you do." Meredith stood. "I can survive Vincent doubting me. I expected better from you." Margaret's face changed. For years, Meredith had treated her like a second mother. Now there was distance. Real distance. Margaret slowly stood. "I'm sorry." Meredith did not answer. After Margaret left, she sat alone in her Mercedes for nearly 10 minutes. Then she drove to Brooklyn, not to Vincent's office. To the old Hartwell warehouse, where her late husband had started the company 40 years earlier. Inside a private room, one framed photograph still hung on the wall. Her husband, young Vincent, young Preston. A family that had once believed loyalty meant protecting one another. Margaret stared at the photograph and understood something she had spent decades avoiding. She had taught the men in her family that women would absorb the damage and call it loyalty. Back in Manhattan, Howard received the first detailed access report. He called Meredith immediately. "The transaction wasn't approved from your laptop." Her heart raced. "Then what?" "The foundation iPad." Meredith closed her eyes. "That device had stayed at the office during her surgery," Howard continued. "And there's more." "What?" "The conference room access log shows one employee entered that floor after everyone else had left." Meredith already knew the answer, but Howard said it anyway. Sienna Caldwell. Someone had tried to turn Meredith into the perfect person to blame, but for the first time, the records were beginning to tell a different story. At 9:12 the next morning, Vincent Hartwell stood in his mother's library holding a forensic access report that made him feel sick. Margaret Hartwell sat behind an antique desk that had belonged to Vincent's father. Sunlight entered through tall windows, catching the silver frame of an old family photograph. Vincent placed the report in front of her. Sienna was in the foundation office the night Meredith's credentials were used. Margaret looked down. The night of the miscarriage? Yes. She went still. Vincent continued. The transaction was approved from the foundation iPad. Meredith was in surgery. Howard confirmed the device never left the office. Margaret's face changed slowly. For the first time, suspicion disappeared. In its place came shame. I asked her if she might have forgotten. Vincent looked at his mother. You did what? Margaret did not defend herself. I went to see her yesterday, and you questioned her. I thought I was being careful. Vincent laughed once without humor. That is what people say when they don't want to admit they doubted someone. Margaret lifted her eyes. You are in no position to lecture me about doubting your wife. The words stopped him. Vincent looked away. Margaret stood. You brought Sienna into the company. I know. You defended her. I know. You humiliated Meredith. Vincent's jaw tightened. I know. Margaret stepped closer. And now the woman you betrayed is the one whose name is attached to a crime she did not commit. Vincent looked at the floor. For years, Margaret had protected him from criticism. Today, she seemed almost angry at herself for doing it. Vincent handed her another document. Preston is pushing the board to suspend Howard and freeze the foundation. Margaret frowned. Why Howard? Because Howard believes Meredith. Do you? Vincent looked directly at her. Yes, there was no hesitation. Margaret noticed. Then why did it take this for you to believe her? Vincent had no answer. Later that afternoon, Margaret drove alone to Judith Lawson's house in Connecticut. No driver, no security, no black SUV behind her. She carried a glass container of homemade chicken soup. Judith opened the door. Margaret gave a tired smile. I came to apologize. Judith studied her. That's Meredith's decision. A few minutes later, Margaret sat across from Meredith at the kitchen table. Meredith wore a soft blue maternity sweater. The blood pressure monitor rested beside her. An unopened Amazon package containing nursery supplies sat against the wall. Margaret looked around the modest kitchen. No marble, no staff, no family portraits carrying the Hartwell name, and yet the room felt warmer than Vincent's mansion. I was wrong, Margaret said. Meredith looked at her. Margaret continued. I should never have questioned you. Meredith's expression remained guarded. I wasn't angry because you asked about the money. Margaret waited. I was angry because when things became difficult, your first instinct was to protect the family name. Margaret lowered her eyes. Meredith placed one hand over Noah. I have spent 9 years protecting that name too. I know. No, I don't think you did. Margaret swallowed. Meredith's voice softened. I stayed through the late nights, through the threats, through Vincent and dinners and holidays, because something always needed him more. Her eyes filled. I cared for your husband when he was sick. I helped your employees. I buried 2 children while people told me I was strong. Margaret's eyes became wet, and when the first real scandal came, you wondered if I had done it. I'm sorry. This time the apology sounded different. Meredith looked away. Margaret whispered. I spent my entire marriage believing keeping a family together was the same thing as protecting it. Meredith looked back at her. Sometimes keeping it together just gives the person hurting everyone more time. Margaret's face crumpled. She covered her mouth for several seconds. Neither woman spoke. Then Margaret reached across the table. Meredith hesitated, but eventually she let Margaret hold her hand. That night, Margaret returned to the old Hartwell warehouse in Brooklyn. The building had been converted years earlier, but one private room remained almost unchanged. Her late husband's desk still stood near the window. On the wall hung a photograph of 3 young men, Vincent, Preston, and Vincent's father. Margaret stared at it for a long time. Then she opened the small safe behind the bookshelf. Inside was a leather folder. Hartwell Family Voting Trust. 17% of the company's voting rights. For years, Margaret had allowed Vincent to exercise her proxy. She had told herself it kept the family united. She had never once asked whether it also taught her son that her loyalty had no conditions. Margaret placed the document on the desk. There was a clause she had read many times, but never used. Proxy may be revoked at the grantor's discretion. She took her late husband's Mont Blanc pen from the drawer. For several seconds, the pen hovered above the signature line. Then she stopped. Not yet. She needed to know more. Across Manhattan, Vincent was in his office when Preston entered without knocking. "You should suspend Howard," Preston said. Vincent looked up. "Why?" "He's compromised." "By fax?" "By Meredith." Vincent's expression hardened. Preston continued, "You're letting guilt control you. Signing those divorce papers was the best thing you could have done." Vincent froze slowly. He leaned back. "I never told you I signed them." Preston's face barely changed, but it changed enough. Vincent watched him carefully. Only Meredith knew. His attorney knew, and Sienna knew. Vincent said nothing more. Preston left 2 minutes later. The moment the door closed, Vincent picked up his iPhone. He called Howard. "Check every communication between Preston and Sienna." Howard paused. "You found something?" Vincent stared at the closed door. "Yes." "What?" "A man who knew something I never told him." For the first time, Vincent stopped asking whether Sienna had betrayed him and started wondering how long Preston had been standing beside her. At 7:34 the next evening, Vincent Hartwell was standing alone in his Manhattan apartment when the private elevator opened. Sienna Caldwell stepped out, carrying a paper bag from his favorite Italian restaurant. For a moment, Vincent simply stared at her. She looked different from the woman he had seen at the Ritz-Carlton residence. No Dior dress, no Cartier bracelet, no carefully styled hair. She wore black trousers, a soft cream sweater, and almost no makeup. She looked tired, vulnerably human, exactly the way someone would look if they wanted to be forgiven. "I didn't know if you'd let me up," she said. Vincent had almost refused. Instead, he had told the doorman to send her upstairs. Now he wondered why. Sienna placed the food on the kitchen counter. "I brought veal piccata." Vincent said nothing. "You haven't been eating. How would you know?" Her face tightened. "Because I know you." The sentence used to make him feel understood. Tonight it irritated him. Vincent walked toward the windows. Below them, Manhattan moved in rivers of headlights. The apartment had once felt like freedom from the Westchester estate. Now it felt like a hotel room. Sienna approached slowly. "Preston is going to blame everything on me. Maybe he should." She stopped. "You think I did this alone?" "I think you lied to me. I was scared. You used Meredith's foundation credentials. I told you Preston had access." Vincent turned. "You told me you never touched the foundation iPad." "I didn't. We have a building log showing you entered that floor the night Meredith was in surgery." Sienna's expression barely changed. "That proves I went upstairs at 7:02. I was working." The approval happened 12 minutes later. Silence filled the room. Sienna's eyes became wet. "Vincent, please." She stepped closer. "I made mistakes, I admit that, but Preston is dangerous." "Then why didn't you tell me? Because you wouldn't have believed me." Vincent almost laughed. "I was sleeping with you. That doesn't mean you trusted me." The cruel part was that she was right. Their relationship had never been built on trust. It had been built on secrecy, compliments, hotels, late dinners. A version of Vincent that did not have to answer difficult questions. Sienna touched his arm. "You're free now." Vincent looked down at her hand. "Am I?" She frowned. "This is what we wanted." His iPhone vibrated. A message appeared. "Meredith, baby appointment tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. You may attend if you want. Please confirm by 8. Vincent stared at the screen. Sienna saw the name. Her hand dropped. "You're going?" "Yes." "After everything she's doing to you?" Vincent looked up slowly. "What exactly is she doing to me?" Sienna blinked. "I mean the divorce, the investigation, the board pressure. She filed for divorce because I cheated on her. She's using this situation." "How?" Sienna hesitated. That was enough. Vincent placed his phone on the counter. "You keep talking about Meredith like she's your enemy. She doesn't trust me. She shouldn't." Sienna's face hardened for one brief second. Then the softness returned. "I love you." Vincent studied her. "Do you?" Her eyes filled again. "Yes. Or do you love what being close to me gives you?" She stared at him. Vincent suddenly remembered the first time Sienna had complimented him. Not his face, not his kindness, his influence. She had told him everyone in the room changed when he walked in. At the time, he had liked hearing it. Now he understood why. The next morning, Vincent arrived at Dr. Lauren Whitaker's office 15 minutes early. No driver, no assistant, no Rolex. Meredith noticed all three things. She sat near the window in a navy maternity dress, one hand resting on her belly. You came? Vincent nodded. I said I would. She looked at him carefully. You usually say a lot of things. He accepted the hit. I know. The nurse called them back. Minutes later, the sound of Noah's heartbeat filled the examination room. Vincent's face changed. He stared at the monitor as Dr. Whitaker measured the baby. 4 pounds 2 ounces. She said growth is good. Vincent swallowed. He's okay? He's doing well. Meredith's blood pressure is what we're watching. He immediately looked at her. What happens if it gets worse? Dr. Whitaker explained warning signs, medication, monitoring, and the possibility of early delivery. Vincent asked question after question. Meredith watched him. Finally, after the appointment, he followed her into the hallway. Can I buy you coffee? No, he nodded. Meredith took 2 steps, then stopped. Vincent, he looked at her. Sienna didn't use the foundation because she hated me. What do you mean? She needed the vendor to look legitimate. Vincent frowned. Meredith continued. A charity payment gave Meridian a transaction history. His expression changed. Before he could answer, Howard Bennett called. Vincent put the phone on speaker. Howard's voice was tense. We traced Meridian beyond the foundation. How far? Vincent asked. 3 Hartwell Atlantic contracts. Meredith's stomach tightened. How much? Howard paused. Almost $18 million. Vincent looked at Meredith. Howard continued. If the banks classify those contracts as fraudulent, they can restrict financing across the company. Vincent's voice lowered. Could it cost me control? Yes. Another pause. And Vincent? What? We found something else. Howard took a breath. One of the investor groups positioned to offer emergency financing if Hartwell Atlantic falls into distress is tied to Preston. Meredith closed her eyes. Vincent said nothing. Everything finally connected. The affair, the foundation, the false approvals, the disappearing vendor, Preston's strange knowledge. Sienna had never been trying to become Vincent Hartwell's wife. She had been helping someone make sure he stopped being Hartwell Atlantic's boss. Vincent had believed Sienna wanted his heart. By noon, he understood she had been standing beside him while someone quietly measured his chair. By 2:15 that afternoon, Vincent Hartwell had stopped thinking of Sienna Caldwell as his mistress. She was now a witness, possibly a conspirator, and maybe the reason his family could lose control of everything his father had spent 40 years building. Vincent sat at the head of the conference table on Park Avenue while Howard Bennett placed 3 folders in front of him. Meredith sat several seats away. She had wanted to return to Connecticut after the prenatal appointment. But once Howard mentioned the $18 million, she agreed to stay for one meeting. Only one. Howard opened the first folder. Meridian Advisory received legitimate-looking payments from the foundation for almost a year. He opened the second. Once the vendor established a clean payment history, the same company appeared inside 3 Hartwell Atlantic contracts. Vincent stared at the pages. And the third? Howard looked at him. The financing group. He slid forward a corporate ownership chart. One company led to another, then another, until a minority investment firm appeared at the bottom. Vincent recognized the name. Northstar Capital Partners. Howard nodded. Preston has no direct ownership. Of course he doesn't. But one of Northstar's managing partners is Thomas Reed. Meredith looked up. Who is that? Vincent answered. Preston's college roommate. The room went silent. Howard continued. If Hartwell Atlantic breaches certain lending covenants because of compliance concerns, Northstar is positioned to provide emergency financing. Meredith understood immediately. In exchange for what? Board seats, Howard said. Voting rights, operational control. Vincent leaned back. For years, he had believed danger would come from competitors, regulators, or enemies outside the family. He had never seriously considered Preston. Preston had attended his wedding, carried his father's coffin, sat beside Margaret during 2 family funerals. He had been there when Meredith lost her first pregnancy. That betrayal felt almost more personal than Sienna's. Almost. Vincent stood. Bring Sienna in. Howard shook his head. Not like that. Vincent glared at him. I need answers. And if you confront her without counsel present, she walks out and later claims intimidation. Vincent hated that Howard was right. 20 minutes later, corporate counsel arranged a formal interview. Sienna arrived at 4:40. This time she wore a navy suit, carried a leather folder, and brought her own attorney. The frightened woman from the Ritz-Carlton was gone. Meredith watched through a glass wall from an adjacent room with Howard. Vincent sat across from Sienna. No touching, no softness, no secrets. Counsel began. Miss Caldwell, were you involved in establishing Meridian Advisory? Sienna's attorney interrupted. My client will answer questions related to company records, not personal allegations. Vincent almost smiled. Personal? As if the affair had been separate from everything else. Sienna finally answered. Yes. Did Preston Hartwell instruct you to establish it? A pause, yes. Vincent's jaw tightened. Why? Sienna looked at him. Because he needed an approved vendor that nobody would question. And you chose my wife's foundation? Preston suggested it. You agreed? Yes. Vincent's voice dropped. Did you use Meredith's credentials? Sienna looked toward her attorney. Her attorney whispered something. Then Sienna answered. I used the foundation iPad. Meredith closed her eyes. Hearing the confession still hurt. Vincent stared at Sienna. Meredith was in surgery that night. I didn't know. You knew she had lost the baby. Sienna's face changed. Everyone knew. And you still used her account. Sienna looked away. Vincent's anger rose so quickly he had to grip the edge of the table. But instead of shouting, he asked something quieter. Was any of it real? Sienna looked back. The relationship? Yes. Her eyes softened. For one dangerous second, Meredith saw the old connection between them. Sienna whispered. At first, I didn't expect you. Vincent waited. You were supposed to be access. The sentence landed like a gunshot. Sienna continued. Preston wanted schedules, board tensions, family trust information. He told me you were lonely enough to talk if someone listened. Vincent's face lost color. And then I started caring about you. Vincent laughed bitterly. You stole from my wife while she was grieving. I said I made mistakes. No, you made decisions. Meredith heard her own words in his mouth. She looked down. Sienna leaned forward. You think Meredith made you stronger? Vincent's eyes narrowed. I think she spent years making me look better than I was. Sienna's composure cracked. She made you weak. No. Vincent spoke calmly now. She made me decent. I was too arrogant to know the difference. For the first time, Meredith looked directly at him through the glass. He could not see her, but she saw something she had not seen in months. Shame. Real shame. Sienna's attorney ended the interview. Before leaving, Sienna turned toward Vincent. Preston is going to take the company anyway. Vincent said nothing. He already has enough directors questioning you. The affair, the divorce, the foundation, the bank restrictions. She gave him a sad smile. You handed him the perfect story. Then she walked out. That evening, Vincent drove to Margaret's home. His mother was waiting in the library. On the desk lay the Hartwell Family Voting Trust. Vincent saw the signature line, still blank. Relief passed through him. He sat across from her. I need your vote. Margaret looked at her son for a long time. For what? To keep control until the investigation is finished. And then I fix this. Margaret's voice remained soft. You still think this is about fixing a company? Vincent looked at her. What else is there? She stared at him with tears in her eyes. Your wife is afraid to call you from a hospital. Your child may be born early. Your mistress used you. Your cousin betrayed you. She touched the voting document, and you came here asking about your chair. Vincent lowered his eyes. Margaret reached for her late husband's Mont Blanc pen. This time, she uncapped it. Vincent had spent his life believing his mother's loyalty was unconditional. That night, he watched the pen move toward a signature that could take away the one thing he had always believed. No one could touch his power. Margaret Hartwell did not sign the document. Not yet. She placed the pen back on the desk and looked at her son. I want one night to think. Vincent stared at her. One night could cost me the board. Margaret's expression hardened. And how many nights did Meredith spend waiting for you? He had no answer. Vincent stood slowly. I'm trying to fix this. No, Margaret said, you're trying to stop losing things. The words followed him all the way back to Manhattan. At 11:08 p.m., Vincent entered his apartment and found 14 missed calls. 7 from his attorneys, 3 from Howard, 2 from Preston, and 2 from an unknown number. He called Howard first. What happened? Howard sounded exhausted. Sienna contacted outside counsel. Vincent stopped. For what? She wants protection in exchange for information. Protection from Preston. Protection from everyone. Vincent walked toward the windows. Below him, Manhattan glittered as if nothing in his life had changed. Howard continued. She claims she has emails, financial instructions, and records tying Preston to North Star. Then let her turn them over. There's a condition. Vincent closed his eyes. Of course there is. She wants Hartwell Atlantic to agree not to pursue civil recovery against her personally. Vincent almost laughed. She helped move millions through fraudulent contracts. She says Preston controlled the operation. She still did it. I agree. Vincent looked at his reflection in the dark window. Months earlier, he would have protected Sienna. Maybe because he wanted to believe she was innocent. Maybe because admitting the truth would have forced him to admit what he had destroyed his marriage for. Tell counsel I'm not negotiating privately, Vincent said. If she wants to cooperate, she does it through the proper process. Howard paused. That is the right decision. Vincent almost asked whether Howard sounded surprised. Instead, he said good night. At 6:40 the next morning, Meredith woke to camera flashes outside Judith Lawson's house. She froze behind the curtain. 3 reporters stood near the edge of the driveway. Judith entered the room holding her phone. It's online. Meredith's stomach tightened. What is? Judith turned the screen toward her. A financial newsletter had published a short article. Hartwell Atlantic faces internal review amid family foundation irregularities. Meredith read the next line. The report mentioned Vincent's pending divorce from his pregnant wife. Her name was included. So was the foundation. No, Judith touched at her arm. Don't read the comments. Meredith already had. Some people accused her of moving money during the divorce. Others said Vincent had hidden assets. Nobody knew the truth, but everyone had an opinion. Her chest tightened. Then she felt pressure behind her eyes. Judith noticed immediately. Sit down, I'm fine. No, you're not. The blood pressure monitor gave them the answer. Judith called Dr. Lauren Whitaker. Within 40 minutes, Meredith was back at the hospital. Vincent learned from Howard while sitting in a legal meeting. He stood so quickly his chair rolled backward. Where? New York Presbyterian. Preston, seated across the table, looked irritated. We have the lenders in 20 minutes. Vincent picked up his coat. Move the meeting. We cannot keep reorganizing the company around your marriage. Vincent stopped at the door. This is not about my marriage. Preston raised his eyebrows. Then what is it? My son. For the first time, Vincent did not wait for Preston's response. He left. When he reached the hospital, Meredith was in a private observation room. She was sitting upright in bed while a fetal monitor traced Noah's heartbeat. Vincent remained near the door. How is he? Meredith looked tired. Okay. And you? My blood pressure is coming down. He nodded. Silence filled the room. Then Meredith spoke. I told you this world would come to my door. Vincent's face tightened. I know. I told you I didn't want cameras outside doctor appointments. I know. I told you Sienna was getting too close to the foundation. His eyes dropped. I know. Meredith's voice broke. And every time I told you something, you made me feel difficult. Vincent looked up. Tears were running down her face. I didn't need you to love me forever, she said. I needed you not to make me feel stupid for believing you when you said you did. Vincent sat in the chair beside the bed. Not too close. You weren't stupid. Meredith wiped her face. I stayed. That was my privilege. She looked at him. He swallowed. And I treated it like your weakness for several seconds. Meredith said nothing. Vincent's eyes became wet. I am sorry. She nodded slowly. I believe you. Hope moved across his face. Then Meredith continued. I'm still divorcing you. The hope disappeared. Vincent lowered his head. I know. That evening, Dr. Whitaker decided Meredith should remain under observation overnight. Vincent stayed in the waiting area. He did not enter again. He did not call Sienna. He did not answer Preston. At 9:17 p.m., his company email stopped working. A message from outside counsel appeared on his personal iPhone. Emergency Family Council 9 a.m. tomorrow. Attendance required. Seconds later, Margaret called. Vincent answered immediately. Mom. Her voice was calm. The meeting is confirmed. He closed his eyes. Have you decided how you're voting? Margaret was silent for several seconds. Then she said, Tomorrow you are going to learn the difference between a mother standing beside her son and a mother protecting him from consequences. The call ended. Vincent remained alone beneath the fluorescent hospital lights. Upstairs, his pregnant wife slept behind a closed door. Somewhere in Manhattan, his mistress was bargaining for her own survival. And by morning, His mother might take away the company he once believed no one could touch. For the first time in Vincent Hartwell's life, every woman he had taken for granted had stopped protecting him at the same time. At 8:56 the next morning, Vincent Hartwell walked into the old Brooklyn conference room where his father had once negotiated Hartwell Atlantic's first warehouse contracts. Nothing about the room looked powerful. No marble floors, no Manhattan skyline, no digital stock ticker. Just dark wood, aging photographs, and a long table scarred by 40 years of family decisions. Margaret Hartwell was already seated at one end. Howard Bennett sat beside outside counsel. 3 independent directors were present. Preston Hartwell stood near the windows, calm in a charcoal suit, as if this were an ordinary board meeting. Vincent took his seat. He had slept less than 2 hours. Meredith remained under observation at the hospital. Noah's heartbeat was stable. For now. Preston opened a leather folder. We need to separate emotion from governance. Margaret looked at him. Go ahead. Preston began with the bank restrictions, then the foundation irregularities, then the affair, then the divorce. Every fact was technically true. That was what made his argument dangerous. Vincent's personal judgment has created reputational damage, Preston said. Lenders are nervous. Directors are divided. We need temporary leadership before this becomes a liquidity crisis. One director leaned forward. What are you proposing? I step in as interim CEO. Vincent almost laughed. Howard did not. Instead, he opened his MacBook Pro. Before anyone votes, the committee needs to see this. A corporate ownership chart appeared on the screen. Meridian Advisory, North Star Capital Partners, 3 intermediate entities, and finally Thomas Reed, Preston's college roommate. Preston's expression changed slightly. Howard continued. North Star positioned itself to provide emergency financing if Hartwell Atlantic breached its lending covenants. Another director frowned. In exchange for what? Board representation, preferred voting rights, operational control. Preston shook his head. This proves nothing. Howard clicked again. Email metadata, corporate calendar records, hotel charges, private dining reservations. Sienna Caldwell and Preston Hartwell had met repeatedly over the previous year. Some meetings happened within hours of suspicious transfers. Preston's voice hardened. You're building a conspiracy out of dinner receipts. No, Howard said. I'm building a timeline. Vincent finally spoke. Did you know Sienna used Meredith's credentials? Preston looked at him. No. Did you know she established Meridian? No. Did you know North Star was preparing rescue financing? I knew options were being discussed. Vincent stared at him. You knew a lot for someone who supposedly knew nothing. Preston turned toward the board. This is exactly the problem. Vincent is compromised. He's angry because his mistress betrayed him, and now he's looking for someone to blame. The room went silent. Margaret looked at Vincent. Did you bring Sienna into this company? Vincent swallowed less. Did Meredith warn you about her? Yes. Did you listen? No. Margaret's voice remained calm. Did you sign the divorce papers? Vincent looked down. Yes. Preston shifted impatiently. With respect, Margaret, his marriage is irrelevant. She turned toward him. No, his marriage is evidence. Preston frowned. Of what? No one spoke. Margaret stood. For almost 50 years. She had been the woman who sat quietly while Hartwell men made decisions. Not today. My husband built this company with one rule, she said. If people trust your name, you protect that trust before you protect yourself. She looked at Vincent. My son forgot that. Vincent's face tightened. Margaret continued. He did not lose my confidence because he had an affair. Vincent looked up. He lost it because he believed consequences were for other people. The words hurt more than anything Preston had said. Margaret opened the leather folder in front of her. Inside was the Hartwell Family Voting Trust. 17% of voting rights. For years, Vincent had exercised those votes through her proxy. Margaret removed one page. Vincent recognized it immediately. Proxy revocation, signed, dated that morning. His throat tightened. Mom. Margaret's eyes filled. I love you. Vincent said nothing. That is why I will not protect you from this. Howard looked toward the directors. The vote began. Preston proposed himself as interim CEO. The motion failed. Then an independent director proposed that both Vincent and Preston be suspended for 90 days, pending completion of the investigation. Howard would serve as interim executive under an independent committee. Margaret voted yes. Vincent watched his mother raise her hand. The motion passed, just like that. Vincent Hartwell was no longer running Hartwell Atlantic. He did not shout. He did not threaten anyone. He simply sat there staring at the table. After the meeting, Margaret approached him. "Do you hate me?" Vincent's voice sounded smaller than she had ever heard it. Margaret's face broke. "No." She touched his cheek. "That is why this hurts so much." Vincent looked away, blinking hard. For the first time since childhood, he cried in front of his mother. Then Howard's phone rang. He answered. His expression changed immediately. "Vincent." Vincent wiped his face. "What?" "It's Meredith." His entire body stiffened. Howard stood. Her blood pressure spiked. "The doctors are preparing for a possible early delivery." Vincent grabbed his coat. Behind him, one director called his name. "The suspension documents still need." Margaret cut him off. "Go." Vincent turned. "What about the company?" Margaret stared at her son. "If you stay here for a chair while your child may be born, then I have taught you nothing." Vincent ran. For the first time in his adult life, the company doors closed behind him, and he did not look back. He had just lost the chair he thought defined him. Now racing toward the hospital, Vincent realized he might lose the two people who should have mattered more. Vincent Hartwell reached New York Presbyterian at 10:41 that morning. He did not remember the drive. He remembered only red lights, the pressure in his chest, and Howard Bennett's voice repeating the same words through the phone. Possible early delivery. By the time Vincent reached the maternity floor, Margaret was already there. She stood outside Meredith's room holding her handbag with both hands. For the first time in years, Vincent did not ask about the company. "How is she?" Margaret looked exhausted. Her blood pressure is still high, and Noah is stable. But Dr. Whitaker is worried that could change. Vincent moved toward the door. Margaret stopped him. She asked for me. The words hurt, not because Meredith had chosen Margaret, but because Vincent understood why she had not chosen him. Inside the room, Meredith lay beneath a pale hospital blanket while monitors surrounded her. Dr. Lauren Whitaker had started magnesium sulfate and medication to control her blood pressure. Meredith hated the heaviness in her limbs. She hated the headache. More than anything, she hated the fear. Margaret sat beside her. Neither woman spoke for several minutes. Then Margaret took Meredith's hand. "I need to tell you something." Meredith looked at her. "I revoked Vincent's voting proxy this morning." Meredith blinked. "You what?" "He was suspended." Meredith's expression changed immediately. "Because of me?" "No." Margaret's answer was firm. "Because of him." Meredith looked toward the window. Margaret continued. "I spent most of my life believing a good wife protected her husband from humiliation." Her voice trembled. "I taught Vincent that love meant someone would always clean up after him." Meredith's eyes filled. Margaret squeezed her hand. "I loved my son badly." The sentence broke something open. Meredith started crying, not because Margaret was apologizing. Because someone from Vincent's family had finally admitted that love without consequences could become another kind of harm. "You loved him," Meredith whispered. "I still do." Margaret wiped her own tears. "But loving him does not require lying for him anymore." A nurse entered. The conversation ended. Noah's heart rate had changed. Dr. Whitaker returned immediately. She studied the monitor. "We're going to watch this closely." Meredith's breathing quickened. "What does that mean?" "It means if the pattern does not improve, we deliver. Today, possibly." Meredith closed her eyes. She was not ready. The nursery was unfinished. The bassinet at Judith's house was still inside an Amazon box. Noah was not supposed to arrive for almost 2 more months. Outside the room, Vincent sat alone. His iPhone vibrated. A company notification appeared. Corporate access temporarily suspended. Then another executive card deactivated. Then an email confirming Howard Bennett's appointment as interim executive under independent board supervision. Vincent stared at the messages. A week earlier, losing access to Hartwell Atlantic would have terrified him. Now he locked the phone and put it in his pocket. For once, the company could survive without him. At 2:18 in the morning, Noah's heart rate dropped again. This time, it did not recover quickly enough. Dr. Whitaker entered Meredith's room with 2 nurses. "We need to deliver." Meredith's face went white. "C-section? Yes. Now? Yes." Margaret stood. Meredith suddenly grabbed her wrist. "If something happens to me, don't. Please listen. Margaret froze. Judith and you make decisions for Noah with Vincent. Margaret's eyes widened. Meredith, I'm serious. Meredith's breathing became uneven. I don't want anyone deciding everything alone. Margaret understood. This was what broken trust looked like when translated into real life. Not speeches, documents, medical decisions, limits. I promise, Margaret said. Then Meredith asked the question she had been avoiding all day. Is Vincent still here? Margaret nodded. He never left. Meredith closed her eyes. Let him come in. Vincent entered wearing hospital scrubs. Without the tailored suit, expensive watch, or people waiting for his orders, he looked almost unfamiliar. He stopped beside the bed. Meredith looked at him for several seconds. Neither spoke. Then she said, If something happens, you listen to Margaret and Judith. Vincent nodded immediately. Yes. No arguments. Yes. You don't turn Noah into another Hartwell project. His eyes filled. I won't, Meredith swallowed. I'm scared. Vincent moved his hand toward hers, then stopped before touching her. Meredith looked at it, then slowly placed her fingers in his. For the first time in weeks, she allowed him to hold her hand. I'm sorry, Vincent whispered. Meredith's eyes closed. I know. That was all she could give him. No forgiveness, no promise, just acknowledgement. 47 minutes later, Noah Lawson Hartwell entered the world. He weighed 4 pounds 6 ounces. He was small, too small, but he cried. Vincent heard the sound and broke completely. He covered his face with both hands. Meredith cried too. Noah was taken to the NICU for breathing support and monitoring. Later, Vincent stood outside the glass, watching his son sleep beneath warm lights. No boardroom had ever made him feel this powerless. A nurse handed him a photograph. He carried it to Meredith after she woke. She stared at Noah's tiny face. He has your eyebrows, Vincent said. Meredith gave a weak smile. He looks angry. Vincent laughed through tears. Then he definitely has mine. For one brief moment, they were not divorcing. They were simply two frightened parents loving the same child. Then Vincent's phone vibrated. A voicemail from outside counsel. Sienna Caldwell had agreed to cooperate fully with investigators. Her first statement was short. Preston had chosen her for one reason. He said Vincent would destroy his own credibility for any woman who made him feel powerful. Vincent listened twice. Then he looked through the glass at Noah. He had spent years believing power meant controlling every room he entered. That night, with his newborn son fighting beneath hospital lights, Vincent finally understood how easily a man could lose everything while still believing he was winning. 3 weeks after Noah Lawson Hartwell was born, Meredith finally held her son without wires between them. The NICU nurse carefully placed him against her chest. He was still small, still under 5 pounds, but he was breathing on his own. Meredith looked down at his tiny face and started crying before she could stop herself. You took your time, she whispered. Noah opened one eye, then closed it again. Across the room, Vincent stood beside the window. He had arrived at the same time every morning for 21 days. No security detail, no assistant carrying his phone, no expensive gifts. Usually, he brought Meredith a decaf Starbucks coffee and asked the nurses what Noah needed. Today, he carried a folder. Meredith noticed it. What's that? Vincent hesitated. Insurance paperwork. She almost smiled. You did paperwork? I'm learning. There was a time Meredith handled every doctor, every bill, every family form because Vincent always had something more important to do. Now he was learning how many invisible responsibilities she had carried. Vincent placed the folder beside her. All of Noah's NICU claims were submitted. Howard helped me understand the company plan. Meredith looked at him. Thank you. 2 simple words, but Vincent seemed to understand they were not forgiveness. Later that afternoon, Howard Bennett called. The internal investigation had reached a turning point. Sienna Caldwell had agreed to cooperate fully. Not because she had suddenly become honest, because Preston Hartwell had stopped protecting her. Sienna's attorney negotiated a formal cooperation agreement with investigators and outside counsel. She would provide emails, financial instructions, meeting records, and access details. In return, her cooperation would be considered when civil claims and possible criminal charges were evaluated. She was not walking away clean. That mattered to Meredith. At 3:30, Vincent attended Sienna's formal interview. Her attorney sat beside her. 2 investigators were present. Howard joined remotely. Vincent sat across the table. For the first time since their affair began, there was nothing private between them. Sienna looked tired. Her perfect image had disappeared. No Dior, no Cartier, no carefully controlled smile, just a woman facing consequences. The investigator began. Did Preston Hartwell instruct you to create Meridian Advisory? Yes. Did he understand that the foundation would be used to establish legitimate vendor history? Yes. Did you knowingly access Meredith Hartwell's credentials? Sienna swallowed. Yes. Vincent's jaw tightened. Did Preston tell you when to do it? Yes. The investigator leaned forward. Why that night? Sienna looked at Vincent. He knew before she answered. Because Meredith was in the hospital. The room became silent. Vincent's face hardened. Sienna continued quietly. Preston knew she couldn't access the system. He said it was the safest time. Vincent stared at her. My wife had just lost a child. Sienna looked down. I know. No, you knew then. She said nothing. The investigator continued. Tell us about North Star Capital. Sienna explained the plan. Preston expected compliance problems to weaken Hartwell Atlantic's lenders. North Star would offer emergency financing. The financing would come with board seats, preferred voting rights, and operational control. Preston would then present himself as the only Hartwell capable of stabilizing the company. Vincent sat back. For years, he had assumed threats to his family would announce themselves loudly. Preston had smiled through dinners while quietly preparing to take his chair. Then the investigator asked the question Vincent had been avoiding. Why did Preston choose you? Sienna's eyes moved toward him. She hesitated, then answered. He said Vincent had one weakness. Vincent's voice was cold. Meredith? Sienna shook her head. No. She looked directly at him. His ego. Vincent did not move. Sienna continued. Preston said you didn't need another woman because you were unhappy. You needed one because you wanted to feel admired. The words hit harder than Vincent expected. He told me to make you feel important, desired, untouchable. Vincent looked away. Sienna's voice softened. At first, that was all you were to me. Access. And later, she blinked back tears. I started caring about you. Vincent laughed once. It sounded tired. You used my wife while she was grieving. I know you used me. Yes. Then don't call what happened between us love. Sienna's face broke. For several seconds. She looked like she might argue. Instead, she nodded. Vincent leaned back. I need to know one thing. His attorney started to speak, but Vincent continued. If Preston had won, what happened to Meredith? Sienna's face changed. What do you mean? The foundation scandal. Her name, her credentials. Sienna looked at the table. Vincent understood. She was supposed to take the blame. Sienna whispered, yes. His hands curled into fists. And the divorce? Sienna closed her eyes. Preston wanted it. Vincent froze. Why? Your mother's trust. Vincent stared at her. Sienna continued. He believed Margaret would lose confidence in you if you publicly abandoned your pregnant wife. He wanted the family divided before the board crisis. Everything inside Vincent went cold. The affair had not merely distracted him. It had been designed to destroy his judgment, his marriage, and his mother's trust at the same time. That evening, Howard called Meredith. The forensic committee cleared you. Meredith sat upright. Completely? Yes. The electronic approvals have been traced. You are no longer considered responsible for the suspicious transactions. Meredith covered her mouth. For weeks, she had carried the fear that her name would remain attached to something she had never done. Now it was over. She cried quietly beside Noah's incubator. Howard waited. Then Meredith asked, what happens to the foundation? That depends on what the board decides. Meredith looked at her son. No. Howard paused. What do you mean? It should not depend on the Hartwell board anymore. Her voice became steadier. If that foundation can be used as a weapon because one family controls everything, then the structure is wrong. Howard listened. Meredith continued. I want independent governance, employee representatives, outside oversight, and your role. Meredith looked down at Noah. I haven't decided. That night, Vincent received Meredith's proposal. He read every page. For the first time in years, he did not ask what Hartwell would lose. He asked what the families depending on the fund would gain. Then he reached for the same Mont Blanc pen he had once used to sign away his marriage. This time he signed his support beneath Meredith's name. The pen that had ended his marriage was now being used to give Meredith something. Vincent had denied her for years. the power to build something without needing his permission. 3 months after Noah came home from the NICU, Meredith Lawson Hartwell sat across from Vincent in a quiet mediation room in Manhattan. There were no cameras, no reporters, no family members. Just two attorneys, a mahogany table, and the final documents ending their marriage. Meredith wore a simple navy dress. Vincent wore a dark suit without a tie. His old Rolex was gone. So was the Hartwell Atlantic Access badge that had once opened every executive floor in the company. He still had money. He still had property. But for the first time in his adult life, none of those things gave him control over the room. Caroline Hayes sat beside Meredith. Vincent's attorney sat opposite her. The terms had taken weeks to negotiate. The Connecticut house would remain Meredith's. The Westchester estate would stay inside the Hartwell family trust. Meredith would receive a fair marital settlement based on 9 years of marriage and the years she had spent helping build the foundation. Noah would have an independent trust. Medical decisions would be shared. Visitation would begin gradually and increase as Noah grew stronger. Everything was practical. Everything was documented. Everything had limits. Vincent read the final page again. His attorney leaned toward him. "We can still challenge the compensation tied to Meredith's foundation work." Vincent did not look up. "No." The attorney paused. "You're certain?" "Yes." Across the table, Meredith watched him. Months earlier, Vincent would have turned every negotiation into a contest. Today, he simply picked up the black Montblanc pen. The same pen he had used the night Meredith told him to take his freedom. He looked at it for several seconds. Then he gave a tired smile. "Funny." Meredith frowned. "What?" "The first time I used this pen to sign something between us, I thought I was taking my life back." Her expression softened slightly. "You were?" Vincent looked at her. "Freedom? No." She shook her head. "Responsibility." He lowered his eyes. Then he signed. This time the sound of the pen against paper felt different. Not like victory, not like escape, like acceptance. Meredith signed after him. When the attorneys began gathering documents, Vincent remained seated. "Can I ask you something?" Meredith looked at Caroline. Caroline nodded and stepped outside with the other attorney. Vincent waited until the door closed. "Do you ever think about trying again?" Meredith did not answer immediately. That silence gave him hope. And for a few painful seconds, she felt it too. She remembered the Vincent who had brought food to the emergency room during her 12-hour shifts. The Vincent who had slept beside her hospital bed after their first miscarriage. The Vincent who now arrived early for Noah's appointments and knew exactly how many ounces his son drank. She still loved pieces of that man. That was what made leaving harder. Finally, Meredith spoke. "If I came back now, I would spend the rest of my life wondering why." Vincent's face tightened. She continued. "Did I come back because you changed, or because I was scared to build a life without you?" "I have changed. I know." That surprised him. Meredith looked directly at him. "But change doesn't erase what happened." Vincent swallowed. "No, and forgiveness is not the same thing as reconciliation." His eyes became wet. "So, this is really it. As husband and wife, yes." He looked down at his hands. Meredith's voice softened. "But Noah deserves a father." Vincent looked up. "I want to be one. Then be one when nobody is watching." He nodded. "I will." After the mediation, they stepped outside into a light Manhattan rain. A black Mercedes waited at the curb, but Vincent did not have a driver anymore. He unlocked it himself. Meredith noticed something in the back seat, an infant car seat properly installed, a diaper bag beside it, a small blanket folded neatly on top. The sight affected her more than she expected. Months ago, Vincent had missed prenatal appointments because he believed business was more important. Now, he had spent an entire afternoon learning how to secure a car seat correctly. It did not repair their marriage, but it mattered. Vincent opened the driver's door. "Meredith." She turned. "I'm sorry I made you believe you had to disappear for me to notice you." Her throat tightened. "I never disappeared." He nodded slowly. "I know that now." He got into the car. Before Meredith could leave, her phone rang. "Margaret Hartwell," Meredith answered. "Hi." Margaret sounded almost nervous. "I wanted to ask about Thanksgiving." Meredith glanced toward Vincent's Mercedes as it pulled away. "What about it? I want you and Noah there." Meredith hesitated. "Margaret, I'm not your daughter-in-law anymore." Margaret was silent for a moment. Then she said, "You divorced my son." Her voice softened. You did not divorce me." Meredith closed her eyes as tears filled them. For the first time since the divorce began, losing Vincent no longer felt like losing an entire family. The marriage was finally over, but Meredith was beginning to understand that ending one relationship did not mean every form of love had to end with it. 11 months after Meredith Lawson Hartwell placed divorce papers on Vincent's desk, she returned to the Hartwell house for Thanksgiving. This time, she did not arrive as Vincent's wife. She arrived carrying Noah. The Westchester estate looked almost unchanged from the outside. Stone walls, long driveway, autumn leaves gathered around the fountain. But inside, the atmosphere felt different. There were no investors, no political donors, no photographers, no men discussing contracts over champagne. Margaret had invited only family. Meredith stepped into the foyer wearing a burgundy wool dress and holding Noah against her chest. He was almost 1 year old now, healthy, curious, and completely unaware that the adults around him had spent the previous year rebuilding their lives. Margaret hurried toward them. "There's my boy." Noah smiled immediately. Margaret took him carefully and kissed both cheeks. Then she looked at Meredith. "You came? I said I would." "I know." Margaret's eyes softened. "I just wasn't sure you'd still want to." Meredith understood. Some places carried memories. This house held too many. The nursery where she had cried after Vincent signed the divorce papers. The staircase she had climbed alone while pregnant. The study where their marriage officially ended. But Meredith was no longer afraid of those rooms. That surprised her. Then she saw Vincent. He stood near the dining room entrance wearing a simple navy sweater and dark pants. No suit, no Rolex, no assistant nearby. He smiled carefully. "Hi." "Hi." His eyes moved toward Noah. "He looks bigger every time I see him." "You saw him Tuesday." "I know." Meredith almost laughed. Vincent had changed in ways no speech could prove. He arrived on time for visitation. He knew Noah's pediatrician. He carried snacks. He checked medicine labels twice. When Noah developed a fever 2 months earlier, Vincent had spent 6 hours in urgent care without calling anyone from the company. Hartwell Atlantic had continued without him. Howard Bennett was now permanent CEO. The lenders had restored normal financing. The independent investigation had cleared Meredith completely. The foundation had been separated from Hartwell Atlantic's direct control. Preston Hartwell was still fighting financial fraud charges. Sienna Caldwell had accepted a cooperation agreement that required restitution, testimony, and the permanent loss of her position in the industry. Nothing had disappeared magically, but the damage had finally stopped spreading. Dinner began at 4. Margaret sat at the head of the table. Meredith sat on one side with Noah's high chair beside her. Vincent sat across from them. For most of the meal, nobody talked about the past. They talked about Noah refusing vegetables, Howard's terrible golf game, Judith's plan to repaint her kitchen. Ordinary things. Meredith had forgotten how healing ordinary could feel. After dinner, Margaret stood with a glass of sparkling water. "I want to say something." Vincent immediately looked uncomfortable. Margaret ignored him. This family spent too many years confusing silence with loyalty. The room became still. Margaret looked at Meredith, and one woman finally refused to stay silent just to keep us comfortable. Meredith's throat tightened. Margaret continued. "She protected employees when we were protecting reputations. She protected Noah when some of us were protecting power." Vincent lowered his eyes. Margaret's voice softened. "And she forced me to understand that the worst habits in a family should not become a child's inheritance." Meredith wiped a tear from her cheek. Then Noah slapped both hands against his tray. Everyone laughed. The tension broke. Later, they gathered in the living room. Noah pulled himself upright against the coffee table. Meredith watched closely. Vincent crouched several feet away. "Come on, buddy." Noah looked at his father, then back at Meredith. One step, then another. Meredith covered her mouth. "Noah." He took a third step, lost his balance, and fell directly into Vincent's arms. Vincent caught him and laughed. Then his face crumpled. He held Noah against his chest and started crying. Not quietly, not politely. Meredith had seen Vincent angry, cold, powerful. She had almost never seen him completely unguarded. Their eyes met across the room. Meredith cried too. For one moment, nothing needed to be repaired. They were simply watching their son walk. Later, Vincent followed Meredith onto the porch. Cold evening air moved across the property. Are you happy? He asked. Meredith thought about it. Her own home, her work, Noah, peace. Yes. The answer hurt him. She could see it. But Vincent smiled anyway. Good. Meredith studied him. You mean that? Yes. He looked toward the window where Margaret was holding Noah. I used to think loving someone meant keeping them. Meredith said nothing. Vincent continued. Maybe sometimes it means being grateful they became happy without you. Her eyes filled. Before she could answer, Margaret opened the door. Meredith, wait. She carried a small Tiffany box. Meredith groaned softly. Margaret, please tell me that isn't jewelry. It isn't. Inside was the silver baby spoon she had bought before Noah was born, but the engraving had changed. Noah Lawson Hartwell, loved beyond names. Margaret touched the inscription. I bought this when I thought the Hartwell name was the most important thing I could give him. She looked at Meredith. I know better now. Meredith hugged her. Over Margaret's shoulder, she saw Vincent standing silently beneath the porch light. For the first time, Meredith realized the Hartwell family had not survived because everyone returned to who they had been. They survived because each of them had finally agreed to become someone different. And, 1 year after Vincent signed away his marriage, Meredith was about to discover that the greatest victory of her new life would have nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with what she chose to build next. 18 months after Meredith Lawson Hartwell handed Vincent divorce papers, she unlocked the front door of a building in White Plains just after sunrise. The sign beside the entrance read Lawson Family Medical Relief Network. Meredith stood beneath it for a moment. Then she smiled. The organization had grown from the old Hartwell Family Relief Foundation, but almost everything about it was different now. Independent board, employee representatives, outside financial oversight, clear approval systems. No family member could move money alone. No executive could hide behind a powerful last name. Meredith had insisted on every rule. Inside her office sat a MacBook Air, a Kindle, a paper cup of Starbucks coffee, and a framed photograph of Noah laughing on a Connecticut beach. He was healthy now, walking, talking enough to make demands, and completely unaware of how close his mother had come to losing herself before he was born. Meredith opened the first grant application of the morning. A warehouse employee's wife needed help covering rent while recovering from surgery. Another family needed transportation to chemotherapy appointments. A third needed temporary childcare after the father suffered a workplace injury. Meredith read each file carefully. This was the life she wanted. Not revenge, not Vincent's company, something useful. At exactly 5 that afternoon, a familiar Mercedes pulled into the parking lot. Vincent stepped out. No driver, no security. He opened the back door and checked the car seat before walking inside. Noah saw him first. Daddy. Vincent's entire face changed. He crouched as Noah ran toward him. Hey, buddy. Noah crashed into his arms. Meredith watched from the doorway. There had been a time when Vincent could not remember prenatal appointments. Now he knew Noah's medicine schedule, favorite snack, pediatrician, bedtime routine, and the exact stuffed bear required for overnight visits. He had not changed because Meredith returned. She never did. He changed because she didn't. Vincent stood with Noah in his arm's diaper bag. Meredith handed it over. Medicine is in the front pocket. 7:10 tonight. I know. Call if his cough gets worse. I will. And no ice cream after dinner. Vincent looked offended. That happened once. 3 times. Noah laughed. Vincent smiled. Your mother keeps records. She learned from Howard. Meredith laughed too. The sound came easily now. That still surprised her. Hartwell Atlantic had stabilized under Howard Bennett. The lenders had restored normal credit lines. The investigation into Preston had resulted in fraud, convictions, and financial penalties. Sienna had testified, paid restitution, and lost the career she once believed would place her permanently among Manhattan's elite. Margaret still controlled her voting trust, and she had rewritten Noah's future. There would be no automatic inheritance of control simply because he was Vincent Hartwell's son. If Noah ever joined the company, he would earn his place. Margaret called it her final lesson. Vincent called it fair. Before leaving, Vincent paused. Do you have a minute? Meredith nodded. They stepped outside. Noah waited near the car, trying unsuccessfully to pull a yellow leaf from beneath one tire. Vincent watched him. Do you remember what you said that night? Meredith knew immediately. You wanted freedom. Take it. Vincent gave a small smile. I thought freedom meant nobody could tell me what to do. Meredith leaned against the railing. And now? He looked at Noah. Now I think it means being able to leave and still choosing to show up. Meredith's eyes softened. Vincent continued. I used to think power was being the person everyone needed. He shook his head. I was wrong. What do you think power is now? Vincent looked at her. Being someone people can trust when they don't need you. For a moment, Meredith said nothing. Then she nodded. That's better. Vincent smiled. I'm still working on it, I know. He hesitated. You saved more than the company. Meredith shook her head. No. Vincent frowned. I stopped saving you. The words were not cruel. They were true. And Vincent understood. He looked down. Fair. Noah called from the car, Daddy. Vincent turned. I'm coming. Then he looked back at Meredith. Thank you for letting me earn this. Meredith smiled gently. You earned it yourself. After they left, Meredith returned to her office. The building was quiet. On her desk waited one final grant application. A pregnant woman named Allison Parker had been abandoned by her husband and needed help with medical bills and temporary housing. Meredith stared at the file for a long moment. Then she picked up the new Mont Blanc pen the board had given her when the network opened. Not Vincent's pen, not the pen that had ended her marriage, her own. She signed the approval. Outside, light snow began to fall over White Plains. Meredith's iPhone buzzed. A message from Vincent. Home safe, he ate. Medicine at 7:10. See you tomorrow. No apology. No request to come back. Just responsibility. Meredith smiled and turned off the office lights. 18 months earlier, Vincent had believed she was giving him freedom. In reality, Meredith had finally taken back her own, and she had learned something no mansion, company, or powerful name could ever teach her. A woman does not become free when a man finally chooses her. She becomes free when his choice no longer decides her worth. Vincent Hartwell once thought power meant being feared. Meredith taught him that real power was having every chance to walk away and choosing every single day to show up anyway.